It's 12 o'clock, so we're going to get started here. Welcome to our listeners to the Mission Design and Automation and Champion Homes webinar on Can You Automate It? Today we're going to be talking about introducing automation to construction manufacturing. My name is Sammy Birch. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Mission Design and Automation. Joining us today, we have Jay McDonald from Champion Homes, Ryan Lillibridge from Mission Design and Automation, and Brettin Leech from Mission Design and Automation. I'll let these guys go ahead and introduce themselves. Thank you to our listeners for joining today. While we go through the presentation, feel free to ask questions in the GoToWebinar chat. Jay, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sammy. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at. My name's Jay McDonald, currently a Regional Vice President for Champion Homes. Prior to that, division manager at one of the manufacturing divisions in Wisconsin. And prior to that, a manufacturing engineer, facilities engineer for Champion Homes. 2002, I kind of entered the industry with Pulte Home Sciences, which was a branch of Pulte Homes, a large national site builder with several panelized plants throughout the country. With that, pass it to Ryan.
Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate the opportunity to have you on today and talk through this topic. It's close to my heart. I enjoy doing automation. My background, got over 16 years in automation. Done a number of different mechanizations for emerging industries and been blessed to see a lot of different applications and work with great companies and great people to go to the position that I'm in now. And I really excited to be talking about automation and learning more every day. Brettin.
Hi, my name is Brettin Leech. I'm in sales and applications here at Mission Design and Automation with a focus on the construction industry and manufactured homes. I've been in the industry for about 5 years, a little over 5 years, with some prior experience in manufacturing and process engineering, and having gone to school for architecture. This one hits pretty close to home. Definitely happy to be here and talk with everybody about our experience and what we've learned as we kind of have been working through this, and what we've seen in working with Jay and the Champion team in regards to the construction industry and where automation really fits in.
Thanks, guys. To let everybody know today what we'll cover, the state of automation in construction manufacturing today, why automation is attractive to plant level managers, processes that do and don't make sense to automate, the role of the automation integrator, and at the end, we'll save some room for any questions that you may have. But as we go through here, we want this to be an open discussion, so please feel free to ask questions at any time you have them. You can put them in the chat box down at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll address them as they come up. And anything we don't get to during the normal course of the presentation, we'll handle at the end. Ryan, why don't you tell us about the state of automation in construction manufacturing today and kick us off here?
Sure, thanks, Sammy. Looking at the state of automation in construction manufacturing today, and just kind of in general, the state of automation, we see a lot of different areas where other countries may be ahead of us in construction for various different reasons in the U.S. here. Then we also see spots where we're probably ahead, and there's different challenges that we overcome. So there's a number of things going on with the labor pool as of recent, not just in construction, but all across the board. I see different labor challenges coming up, absenteeism at work, a number of challenges to be overcome with mechanization and automation. There's a number of pieces of equipment that are being used in Europe that may have parlays into the North American market, and it's just always changing. So jumping into that, I guess, Jay, what have you seen in other countries, and where do you feel maybe the U.S. lags and maybe where the U.S. is ahead, or some drivers behind that dynamic?
Well, certainly some of the things that differentiate our market from, say, Europe or Asia is just the size of houses typically in the North American market. several of the Asian and European-based automation endeavors are focused on, let's say, a 10-meter long box size, 36 feet or thereabouts. Many of the houses that we are doing here in the U.S. and factory-built environment are substantially larger than that. And attempts to enlarge automation that was designed essentially to process 36-foot long boxes sometimes does not lend itself to go into 76-foot boxes that we do typically build here in the States.
Yeah. Any other points that you see? I definitely see the house sizes are different. And then here we have a lot of different dynamics at play, just from a size of the North American market versus maybe the size in Europe or some Asian countries as well. So
yeah, there's certainly several differentiating factors as well. The grade of lumber that we deal with here in the United States, number 2 and number 3, is typically construction grade lumbers. Southern yellow pine, spruce pine fir are 2 other classifications that significantly impact the behavior characteristics of the lumber. Europe tends to use a DIN standard lumber that is much more standardized or less variation. So that helps in their automation, where automation here in the States has to deal with reality, which is the grade of lumber that we typically deal with. I think Europe and Asia have dealt with limited labor pool. Again, something here in the United States up until recently, there's been a substantial pool of labor to assemble houses. So the payback on automation was less attractive than Europe. We talked about the segmented market. Again, the United States is a big country compared to Europe and or the Asian markets. So we're dealing with, 120-pound snow loads in the mountains and the lake shores, and 140-mile-an-hour wind loads down in the Gulf Coast region. So the variability of codes and what we need to deal with tends to limit the standardization that we can do in the United States. And then finally, just population density. Transportation costs are significant, and I'll say a 500-mile radius around the plants typically is your limit. And if you look at Europe and Asia, that comprehends huge pools of potential customers. In certain areas of the United States, that 500-mile radius is limited population density. So all of those factors have, I think, driven Asia and Europe to embrace automation probably earlier than North America.
Yeah, those are great points, Jay, on that. I think moving on too with that, just comparing different countries and what you've seen in those other countries and what Champion's moved here is in the U.S. With these new challenges of the labor pools and other areas. What are some other reasons that Champion would be looking to mechanize or automate beyond just geography?
Well, certainly if you've looked at the housing markets recently, demand is outstripping ability to supply for the entire industry. That's not limited to Champion Homes. So the desire to increase productivity to try to meet the demand is certainly one of the inciters that's bringing us to look more closely at automation than maybe we have in the past. The limited labor pool that we're now experiencing, and I'll say the stigma of construction industry is another element that sometimes negatively impacts our ability to attract and retain quality employees. So automation to address some of the heavy lifting and the physicality of actually building a house, and that would open the market, the potential employee market, to a larger segment of the population. And then finally, we're looking to improve the quality of the workplace. Folks go home covered in sawdust and drywall mud and foam seal. If anyone's dealt with foam seal all over their shoes and their britches, the ability to isolate some of those processes with automation to take the actual operator further distance from the producers of the dust and the dirt and the overspray is also an opportunity. Again, improve the quality of the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's great, Jay, with the different points there. I mean, it's really fantastic what Champion's doing, and really the opportunity that you guys have with the market. I just think about the implications for the country and for the population in general. Is there's a housing shortage, people need homes to live in. It's a basic necessity that everyone needs, and not to be able to get that in time is really a big deal. So, and then also a safe work environment for people to thrive and continue to have a growing career, not only for the ergonomics of it, but also the educational and the learning aspect of it. So really a lot of things that can be tackled here that are bigger than maybe just homes. It's people's livelihoods and people's how they make a living, where they live, producing those houses in a timely manner, and then giving people their career path to potentially learn automation. Really exciting what Champion's doing with those items and where they're going and heading. I don't know if you have any more on that, Jay, or
I pretty much said my piece on some of the reasons why we're looking closer at automation than maybe we have in the past. But you did touch on one point that I think is very significant: is safety, right? Historically, the construction industry has not rated very high in OSHA standards for workplace injuries, and we certainly need to address that. And taking some of the processes that driving fasteners, as an example, if you can take that out of an operator's hands and move that to an automation with proper guarding and shielding, that lessens the opportunity for workplace injuries, which is critically important for lots of reasons.
Yeah, and I've seen some stop saws at Champion as well. So there's definitely areas where safety is always top of mind, right? Anytime we do automation, safety first and foremost. We put something in place. We want to make sure that whoever's on that system is going home as good or better than they came in that day. And maybe that's a good lead into what can make automation or mechanization attractive to plant level managers or not attractive. I don't know, maybe Brettin, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So at first glance, automation can seem to be a bit scary to some, or may raise a red flag in their mind. And there's a lot of questions that tend to come up. And I think the goal that we have is basically getting in front of those people that really have those concerns and trying to address them right away, and just kind of do a little bit of an icebreaker, really, to get them feeling a little bit more comfortable and let them know kind of some of the areas really where we try and focus on to really help them out, because that's our goal here. Really is we're here to help. We're not here to mess anything up or kind of get in the way of anything. We're here to help where we can and try and help with some of the areas of concern that are in the current workplace. So kind of starting off with some of the areas that are commonly brought up by plant level managers or executives, and the reasons that they really reach out to ASIs such as Mission to really start looking into automation and kind of what they can do for them. The first is just kind of a reiteration of exactly what Ryan and Jay just said. With they're looking to protect their employees that they have on their floor, especially in this industry. It's not very common that you walk out on the floor and you find an employee that that's able to lift 2 to 3 4x8 sheets of OSB that has been there for longer than 5 years, right? They often you start to whittle down a little bit, and then when you get to that point where you just can't do it anymore, you're kind of placed somewhere else, and you got to kind of bring in the next burly guy, right? So, and along with that, when you're trying to protect your employees and really get them out of harm's way, taking the heavy handling of components. That's not just sheets of OSB. That's sub-assemblies that like bathroom installments and everything that are kind of sub-assembled offline and brought in to the home on some of these manufacturing floors. Really getting them out from underneath a crane when that thing is hoisted up in the air and having to hand drive that crane, trying to offset that risk a bit, and again get them out of harm's way. Fastening is another one. I think everybody has seen horror stories of nail guns or screw guns gone wrong and kind of going through people's steel toe shoes and everything, and it's not a pretty sight, and nobody ever wishes that on their employees. So if we can come in and find a way to really remove them from that risk, it's just a win-win situation. And another one in that same realm is cutting, right? Saw blades are probably one of the most dangerous things you'll find on the shop floor in these kinds of environments. And again, if you can have the means there to create some distance between your operator and that saw, that again, just another win-win situation. And so another reason that they might reach out is they see something that is monotonous, and it might be perceived as an easy task, but they have some of their best and most skilled workers that are being taken up by this process, and their bandwidth is kind of being maxed out by doing these processes. And maybe they've seen some YouTube videos, or they've seen stuff on LinkedIn or something like that, and then it kind of piques an interest in their mind that says, yeah, maybe automation of some sort can come in and do this, and we can put Bob over here where it's not so easy, and it might even be a bottleneck area in their facility. And then what that does is that if you're automating that solution a bit, it opens up the ability to take down the requirements for that job a little bit, and open up the labor pool, if you will, because now it's not handling heavy components or anything like that requires exact measurements, and you're allowing the machine to do it. Now you just need somebody there that can keep the machine fed and just keep the process flowing. And then when you do put somebody in front of one of these machines, it's kind of a cool thing, especially when you have somebody that's sitting there, let's say for instance running a nail gun all day, just kind of nailing OSB on a daily basis, and you put a bright and shiny new cell in front of them, and you tell them that, hey, you're going to be responsible for running this, and they feel a sense of importance and value that the company is putting in them to take this new shiny toy that you just put in front of them and told them that, hey, you're responsible for running this and keeping up with everything. So that it kind of it just kind of revitalizes that feeling of importance, and it can really help up morale in a big way. And potential to draw on a wider and more diverse labor pool, kind of echoing a little bit of kind of what I said in earlier about taking those monotonous processes and being able to put the tools in place to where you don't need a 225-pound big burly guy to be able to lift these sheets. Maybe you're putting in lift assist tools or something of that sort to take that load off of the operator, and now they're just having to walk a pendant down the line rather than having to carry the full load of the components at hand. And then I think the biggest one that we typically see outside of protecting operators and everything is really the ability to get more precise and obtain higher repeatability from the machines, and kind of trying to take out that human error factor, and especially in the instances where you're cutting OSB or anything like that, and being able to achieve a higher yield out of your materials, and in the long run then you're reducing the amount of scrap, or you're even able to utilize your scrap. You can it's just, again, a win. You have less in your dumpsters. So I guess, Jay, from your standpoint, when in the early on stages of understanding automation, what were some of the things or some of the drawbacks maybe that you see, or maybe that you're even seeing right now, since you've been in conversations with Mission and working through a couple of things with us, maybe some drawbacks or pushback that you've seen in talks about automation being implemented into the Champion Homes facilities.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brettin. Yeah, plant management is typically get it done kind of guys, right? So when they hear that we're going to replace a manual layup table with some piece of automation, their concerns are several. One is typically my maintenance technician is a welder and a fabricator and has been servicing hoists for the past 20 years, probably not ready to take on being an automation technician, as an example, or certainly a controls engineer that's able to program PLCs and robotics. So that's going to be intimidating. And that's certainly not to degrade the skills of a welder and fabricator. They're critical for keeping the plants running. But there are some skill sets that come along with automation that would currently probably not on staff at many of our assembly plants. So that's a concern of the plant manager or the division manager. They're also going to be concerned with feedback from their employees that, oh, gee, you're trying to replace me with automation or robots. And I'll say certainly from Champion Home Builders perspective, that is absolutely not the case. The case is we're trying to improve throughput and redeploy operators that would maybe not be required on a particular area where automation is appropriate, and redeploy those operators to areas where automation is absolutely not appropriate. And again, to improve throughput, certainly not eliminate operators. That's not on the agenda at all. The third concern that would be voiced by plant managers is some of the highly publicized failures. And I think probably everyone here knows of the Katerra horror story, right? Millions and millions and millions of dollars invested in developing a pretty impressive, at least in videos, automation kit. They filed for bankruptcy and are being liquidated today. So those examples of where maybe automation wasn't applied appropriately are certainly a concern to plant managers. And then finally, always, as I say, these guys are get it done kind of guys. What if the automation goes down? What's my backup plan? If this particular set of kit is making my floors and it's dead in the water, I can't build houses if I don't have floors. That's the second station on the line, right? So I think automation is appropriate if you understand where it's applicable and where maybe it is not the appropriate approach. That's redundant, but to solving a construction challenge. So there's all the pushback, but Brettin, you hit the real great reasons to pursue it. Safety, we talked about that. We talked about addressing the physicality. So automation is great for lift assists or for handling 2x6x14s or 4x8 sheets of OSB. And then finally, what we'd like to do is address some of the accuracy requirements, where instead of an operator pulling a tape measure and marking floor joist locations as an example, you can use an encoder that's going to be accurate to within a 32nd of an inch, basically. So accuracy, safety, and addressing the physicality, I think, are very appropriate applications of automation.
Great points. Yeah, and I think you touched on it, and I kind of did as well. I think another thing about automation is automation can often be perceived as just robots inside of a set of guarding, for instance. But as we alluded to a handful of times, lift assist and just safety devices of any sort, assist tools in any realm can be perceived as automation, and it's stuff that we deal with on a daily basis. It might not always be a yellow arm that's handling OSB sheets. It might be it could be a Cartesian robot or just kind of boil it down to just tools in a sense. And then on the knots, I'll also kind of to chime in on the one that is also commonly brought up is the cost that is perceived when it comes to automation and some of the pushback that might come from there, because you might get the idea that it looks cool and everything, but it probably costs way too much. And I think when we start diving into some of the ways that our customers, such as Champion, and start taking in all of the factors that really can go into calculating ROI on a specific machine, things like being able to attain a higher yield out of your product, and you're not having to order as much OSB for that given process in a facility, is something that can commonly be overlooked rather than just the straight value and price or cost of the machine at the forefront. So, but yeah, all great points, Shay. Yeah, and then to kind of touch back a bit on, where really can automation be utilized inside of a facility, and going back to being able to take some of this out of the operator's hands and really understanding where automation fits in, and maybe where it doesn't, and getting a good idea. I think, Ryan, you can do a pretty good job of touching on those points.
Sure, I can jump in on those. Yeah, good conversation on that, and where it doesn't make sense. It's really not always easy to figure out. It can be a challenge, but that's why they have all the right people in the right places to work together to figure out those challenges. Sometimes it can be very straightforward and easy when you look at some processes and there are solutions available to plug in that right solution. But some of the things that you want to look for when you're looking to do automation or mechanization, I'll say. I would say some of the stuff that we look at would be classified as mechanization. Others may be automation. Some will use robots as a tool. Others will use pick and places or lift assist. There's all kinds of different tools in the automation toolbox. And working together with the customer to figure out which ones are right is the way to go. But typically what we look for is highly repetitive processes. So areas where someone's doing the same task over and over again are a prime task for automation. It allows that person to take their skills elsewhere in the company. So the robotics in that would be an amplification factor, or the automation would amplify the throughput of the team, allowing that person to go elsewhere in the company and tackle tasks. So highly repetitive task. Dusty, dirty, dangerous, degrading are things that you'll hear people talk about in this industry as well. And that's all around the safety of the individual, the ergonomics that take place, and really the longevity and the desirability of the workforce to want to come work for you versus the competitor down the road that may be paying more right now given the current situation in the labor market. So those are areas that we look at as well. Are you having attrition rates on certain jobs that should be automated because you have fallout there and you want to retain people or give people a more rewarding task to tackle? Transfer of materials from stage to stage. So material handling, by definition, isn't value add to a product. It's just moving it from one place to the next. Often in construction industry, that can be dangerous or taxing to the body. So those are areas where we want to look at. And then kind of how it packages together with a full system. Ideally, in places where it gets complex in a manufacturing facility, you want to do a value stream map, understand where your bottlenecks are in the system, what that looks like from an automation standpoint. Can that bottleneck be solved with automation, or should that bottleneck be solved with labor due to the complexity? And that moves into some of the areas where maybe it doesn't make sense either, which would be a low volume, high complexity. Let's say you're running a lot of different variation through or customizations through certain areas that you'd see where people have options to pick from, and many different options. That may be an area that's more suited to a craftsman tackling and allowing that craftsman to tackle those highly complex areas. Process subject to revision based on customer demand, again, is another area. And then extremely large subcomponent handling. Sometimes that just doesn't come with an ROI for the automation lift assist mechanism that you may use. You're still going to use cranes in areas. These are big houses with big pieces and parts, and there's more effective ways to do that than robotics at times. So some of the areas that we look at. I think some other areas that you'd want to look at are if you're struggling to attract a workforce, given the nature of your environment. If you have people looking for technological jobs, right? So if they walk into a company and feel like they're walking into a factory job versus walking into, wow, this is a tech company, I think automation can help paint a picture of a company transitioning into the future of manufacturing. So drawing in that talent that's needed and being an attractive workforce, attractive to the workforce. Sometimes robots, other mechanization, or machines like that will help change that perception around the market, allow that to take place. So there's some of the areas we look at that make sense and some that don't. But it's also important to make sure that you pick the right team to work with. You're going to need someone that's going to want to listen. It's not an easy process. You're going to have to step through a lot of different things and find out different metrics, take measurements in the plant, walk around the plant, talk about pain points at different levels. So there's a lot of different things that are going to happen throughout a process to understand if automation is right and what areas. I think maybe we'll jump into that with you, Brettin, and kind of what to look for when you want to partner with an automation integrator and how they can bring value to that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, and just as a friendly reminder, always feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll definitely address them either as we go on or at the end, a lot of amount of time. So, yeah, as an integrator, there's a handful of things that we really try and take part in, and where we try and fit in to the scenario that really a customer is working towards. I think one of the biggest things that we do when we first kind of dive in head first is we make sure that we're collaborating with the customer, where our goal really is to immerse ourselves in exactly what the customer has going on and the product or the process that is at hand, and really get a good understanding. I think, especially getting immersed into the construction industry, one of the biggest things that going from to several different facilities is really picking up on the lingo across all of the facilities and getting an understanding of what is referred to as a box and metals and those types of things and throughout the facilities, and so you can understand and you can ask questions, and communication is really probably the highest value that we hold with our customers is not being afraid to ask any questions, and not only asking them, but also if it's something that maybe they don't know, or if it's a question that we're being asked and it's something that there's a little bit of a lack of knowledge maybe there, is bringing in the right people to be able to stimulate that conversation and help get those questions answered. And then again, kind of alluding to going to the sites and really seeing everything that's going on. I think a very common instance is when you go to one facility and then go to another one that's maybe an hour or two away from the previous facility, and things are done with some similarities, but maybe not exactly the same, and maybe it's just the facility layout that's really driving that's the driving reason for those differences. But really getting again kind of immersed and understanding what really is at hand and where to fit in, and making sure that you're exposing yourself to all of the elements and getting a good understanding. And when we do immerse ourselves also, there's never really a day, especially in the applications world, for myself and everybody that really is in the automation industry. I think I can say that there's never really a day where you're not doing something new. So you're always learning about new technologies. There's always new technologies coming out, and really doing our due diligence to get up to speed and get a good understanding, getting on the phone with maybe some of these new technology experts and sharing that information with whomever we're working with. And maybe it even turns into kind of a three-way call to really get them, up to speed as to some of the options that we're weighing. Being versatile is another really strong suit of being, an ASI that's kind of, we have our hands in multiple different industries, and we get exposed to a lot of different industries. And although it may not seem like a certain application will work for, let's say, the construction industry, you'd be surprised how very little tweaks can be made to make it actually fit for the application that's at hand. So having the exposure to those other industries and really getting to learn and the know-how on how to handle certain processes and overcome obstacles is a big benefit. So it's something that we try and share as an integrator with the customers that we are working with. I think another point is learning how to scale and grow with some of the new technologies or the new processes that we learn, and how to take that and implement it. And I think the thing that we always try to focus on is starting with a small win, and then do just that. You scale from there. You don't necessarily try to go from start to finish right out of the gate and try and capture everything under the sun. You really, especially with maybe somebody who is a little bit newer to the automation world, it's always good to get the relationship started with a small win and get a good understanding in there before you really try and take on some of the bigger, more difficult tasks. So, and then simulations is one thing, as you can see on the slide, that's kind of a snapshot of a simulation that we've done previously. Simulations are highly utilized by mission for, I think what it does is it really paints the picture. So it can be used in multiple different ways. In the upfront, and let's say the quoting phase, or when you're really starting to dive in and understand the process at hand, and you're trying to get everybody on board and get everybody in the same understanding of kind of what you are proposing and how you're really going to tackle some of these difficult tasks. Being able to put together a simulation to paint that picture and show things moving and showing how things are being tackled is something that can really push somebody over the edge and really get their buy-in. And then also, in addition to simulations can also be proved out for throughput analysis, or trying to figure out real-time tack times for a given process to see really if the process that you're trying to implement automation to if it makes sense. Jay, I guess in your experience before I continue on, what have you experienced in working with Mission? And kind of tying in an integrator and some of the stuff that maybe we've definitely learned from you and the Champion Homes team. What are some of the things that you have gotten to experience and learned, maybe opened your eyes a little bit in working with the integrator?
Well, certainly I will say that that is Champion Home Builders, know how to build houses. Now that's a blessing and a curse. We do know how to build houses, but we also have some paradigms by that is how we've processed houses in the factory environment for 50 years. And I will say, bringing in Mission Automation, it's a fresh set of eyes that question everything. And maybe some things that we've accepted for years as being, well, that's how you do it. Once being questioned, we find out that the logic behind that process is not solid. So I'll say a couple things. The bringing in Mission Automation and looking at the assembly of a house with the same eye towards automation that we've not had, candidly, internally. So it opens up that back and forth dialogue, the 5 whys, and many times our answers fail after about the second why, and you find out that there is opportunities that maybe at first glance we didn't believe existed. The second element that has been, I'll say, brought to light is some of the design for automation ideas that are, prevalent in the automotive industry and the food processing industry. Quite honestly, probably don't exist in the factory built structure industry. So that has opened up our eyes to questioning our design and how products are designed. And they were designed 50 years ago when you had craftsmen swinging a hammer. Maybe that is not the assembly technique or the methodology that lends itself to being automated. So I think you touched on, you must be open and versatile. You cannot come into the discussion with this is how it's got to be. It has to be collectively and collaboratively. How do we develop an equipment set and a process that does improve our productivity or improves the workplace layout without totally preconceived notions that this is how you build a house, and you folks come in with the preconceived notion is I'm going to apply a Fanuc model XYZ robot to everything. So that part, I'll say, has opened our eyes quite a bit. And I think it's an ongoing development, if you will, of opportunities to automate and opportunities to streamline our processes. So it's kind of our perception of the arrangement.
Yeah, can I jump in a minute too on that, just on the topic? We have some of our own lingo that we use sometimes. ASI is an automation system integrator. Just for those of you that may not understand what that means, it's a general term for any type of automation company. So wanted to jump on that. And then I guess Jay had a question as we're talking about this too, is there's a whole nother dynamic than what's the right machine, what's the right fit, what's the right ROI. When you're coming into kind of an emerging automation area, it's often, how does the culture accept it? How do you move through that in a way that is a positive manner? And then also, what's the right level of growth and acceleration rate for those? Those are really tough questions that an organization has to work through, alongside of a whole other slew of things that as an organization need to take place to facilitate automation. Any thoughts on that?
I think Brettin touched on many of the aspects of it. What are good candidates for automation and what maybe aren't good candidates for automation. I'll touch on some of the good opportunities is I'll say offline subassemblies, where you can run a piece of automation, which, let's be honest, is an expensive investment. You need to get productivity out of it to meet the ROI requirements. Well, the opportunity to, and I'll just make it up, standardize bathroom cores and automate assembling and framing a bathroom core. If you can move that offline, generate the ability to produce at a higher volume and maybe service 2 or 3 plants, and lead the installation of the standardized subassembly. Now that's where automation does not appear to work, right? You have craftsmen installing items. There's always, I hate to use the term, but there's some fudging required, right? You're hanging interior doors and the drywallers missed the opening a little bit, so you got to fudge that case molding to cover that up. Finesse. Okay, instead of fudge. No, and it's sincere and legitimate. There's a certain level of craftsmanship into assembling a house that you can't replace and automate simply because of the variation of everything that comes at us. So there's elements that I think the receiving plant is receptive to. You guys mentioned highly repeatable elements that typically the customer maybe doesn't really see, like structural elements, that there is a receptivity for that because they do see the advantage of safety, of heavy lifting, of getting the dusty, dirty processes away from operators. But there's also the recognition that several aspects of assembling a house or a structure in a factory environment, they require skilled folks to do it. And I believe there's recognition that no one's going to replace those skilled or operations that require an artisan with automation. So,
As a matter of fact, you want to allow them more time to use that skill.
and we touched on that earlier, is let's free up those people that have those skill sets to do the operations that cannot or don't lend themselves to automation. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jay. I know I went a little off the PowerPoint script there, but Brett, I don't know if you want to wrap us up and kind of open up for questions.
And I think just to kind of the last couple points to make here, really, Jay, you spoke to it perfectly. You guys are exposed to this every day, right? I spoke on the fact that we are, we see multiple things on a given day, and we're never really just really focusing on one topic at any given time, really. Whereas, this is something that you are eat, sleep, breathing, for lack of a better term, I guess. So really being able to open up the conversation and really get a good understanding. And I keep going back to immersing yourself, but it's a really important quality when we're trying to jump in and really get an understanding. And I think that it doesn't really just stop in a conference room, right? You can have all the executives sitting in a conference room, and it's great to talk about it. But one of the things that we really try to focus on is we wrapped up the conversation here. We said, all right, we have a good understanding of what we need to look for. Now let's get out on the shop floor, and I want to talk to everybody that's out there and kind of walk the line, and maybe just stand there for 5 minutes and kind of watch what's going on. But then after they're done placing something, let's walk up and ask them what could be done better here. How can we help? I think is one of the questions that we mainly try to ask when we're walking out, and it can also kind of break that ice a little bit too for the acceptance of automation, if you will. The constructive criticism for us is always welcomed. I was told on day one when I was getting into the automation industry is that you have to come in with thick skin, because you're going to get shut down a lot, and there's a lot of ideas that you'll come up with that actually might not really be functional when it comes down to it. So being able to open yourself up to obtaining all of that constructive criticism, and then taking it and molding it into something that works and it achieves the goal, and it's also something that the customer is looking for, is something we try to drive home. And our approach, really kind of going back to in the integrator world and interfacing with new customers, is again trying to really pivot off of getting that small win first, and really getting everybody in a good understanding, and not chasing the carrot at the end of the stick when you see like, hey, let's do end-to-end automation here. Let's focus on something that's small, because typically that end, there's a lot of factors that come into play, and it might look attractive, but it's not always necessary nor ideal in most cases. So, and something that we've really worked on with you at Champion is we've started with alpha systems, and those are a great, call them pilots, for really getting to understand the process and everything in a industry that's, at least in North America, is relatively new to automation. And what that allows us to do is, from the alpha system, you're able to run the machine, and that's not necessarily your set in stone design. The alpha system is there strictly to run it, get some product out of it, and then go back and make changes, and then later implement those changes on that machine and the machines afterwards. So, and then, maybe someday come to an agreement on what a final design actually is for that given machine. So,
and that carries over into subsequent machines, totally unrelated, if you will, to your pilot process, because you find that the interfaces between engineering and production, as we develop and exercise those systems, the shortcomings come to light. And although the next machine may be in a different area of the plant, processing a completely different element of the house, the lessons learned on your first workstation many times are applicable to subsequent stations, regardless of whether they're a duplicate or trying to redo the first process. The lessons learned are valuable going forward regardless.
Yeah, I think at this point we'll jump to questions. I think the big takeaway there is it takes lots of questions. It takes lots of dialogue, some candid conversations and transparency between both groups. As you can see, we probably keep talking to Jay for another couple hours, no problem. Mm-hmm. But we want to open up the questions for the webinar. If anyone has any, please put them in the chat and we can address those and jump on them. But we also want to allow people time. There's often 1 o'clock meetings that people need to get to as well. So
if there aren't any questions, feel free. We'll chat a little bit more here. But if there aren't any questions, we'll be recording this webinar, sending it out to attendees and registrants. As always, feel free to email us info@mission-llc.com. We're on all social media platforms, so visit us there if you've got any questions, or if you get off today and come up with some questions or have an idea that you want to run by us, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here welcoming it. So thank you, Jay. Wonderful having you here today on our inaugural webinar. Great conversation. It's a topic we're all pretty passionate about. So yeah, if there's no questions, I think we'll jump off here. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Jay, again, thank you for being on our first webinar, and stay tuned for our next one coming up in a few weeks here.